Every tank offers some kind of offense-defense balance. British heavy tank Churchill Mark I leans towards defense a lot, which is very ironic for a vehicle with two cannons. Churchill Mark I has two guns. A smaller cannon is located in the most usual place, the turret. It has a relatively small caliber, so don't expect a lot of penetration or damage, as its shells are barely above 1 kilogram. Nevertheless, with this gun you can use APHE rounds, which is quite an unusual thing in British tech tree. Of course, such small projectile won't deal a lot of damage anyway, so you will continue getting experience in your dealing no damage skill, just like with the rest of British tanks. But the shell still has better chances to one-shot opponents, though its penetration is very bad. 66mm at close range is not much to begin with, and it drops significantly the further away your target is. So at some point you will still need to use usual armor-piercing capped, ballistic capped, non-damaging shells. On a good note, since cannon's caliber is relatively small, an experienced loader can easily load another round in less than 3 seconds and continue drinking his tea. So it's good idea to carry good amount of both of these shells and quickly switch them depending on situation. Compared to previously mentioned cannon, a howitzer might look big and dangerous, but apart from looking scary, it doesn't really do anything else. The only damage-dealing shell is high explosive fragmentation, but a 76mm caliber round is too small to be effective. A small amount of explosives only allows its fragments to have 10mm of penetration, which in most cases is not enough to reach opponent's crew members. Even external modules like tracks or cannon will hardly suffer any damage unless you land a direct hit. When it comes to very light or open-top vehicles, the shell could of course hull break them, but in practice it almost never happened. The main reason for that is terrible ballistics. 210 meters per second velocity makes it one of the slowest shells in the game. Additionally, howitzer's horizontal guidance only allows you to shoot forward in 30 degrees arc, and reload time is more than twice longer than your 40mm cannon. Usually, when light vehicle appeared in my sight, machine gun was much faster and easier to use, especially at range. Despite these high explosive shells being very ineffective and most of the time plain useless, I still prefer to use them over smoke rounds. That is because you have a great alternative which works more or less the same way: smoke grenades. They are fired forward from your turret, and that is most of the time pretty much the same direction as your forward-facing howitzer. There are over 20 grenades, which is enough for the whole match, and only 1 second delay between launching them. Additionally, rotating your turret is a much faster way of popping smoke in required direction than spinning the whole hull. Unless you need to drop smoke further away from your tank, I think chance to deal additional damage with high explosive rounds might be more useful. Heavy tanks are not very fast. Churchill Mark I has maximum speed of only 31 kph. Engineers made sure that there is no risk of spilling tea. The silver lining is tank's acceleration. Whenever you have a chance to move forward without making any turns, you should be able to reach that maximum speed quite easily. And as a relatively low battle rating tank, you won't be fighting on very big maps, where slow speed would become a bigger issue. Though when you need to move backwards, it doesn't matter how small the map is. 2 km/h reverse will make you suffer, especially when your gunner gets knocked out and you need to disengage from the area that is under enemy fire. One of the best things about Churchill Mark I, it has a very thick armor for its battle rating. Sides of the hull are around 60, while frontal plates reach almost 90 mm thickness. Some opponents simply won't be able to penetrate it, especially if you angle the hull. But the most impressive is the turret. There are some tricky angles that might result in ricochet or at least increase effective thickness. Armor here is over 100 mm, and it even has an additional plate that overlaps, resulting in extremely good protection. Only a few opponents will be able to penetrate your turret head-on. Yes, the main plate has gaps, so in theory opponents can penetrate you here, but since shells recently became volumetric, it's quite difficult to hit small weak spots. For this reason, Churchill Mark I can single-handedly stop enemy forces on certain maps, where you can hide the hull in strategic position and become pretty much invincible. And 15 degrees guns depression is a very nice addition to turret's armor, which allows you to comfortably play hull down. In arcade, people usually play heavier vehicles, and name tags reveal opponents from further away, so engagement's distance increases. So APHE shells become absolutely useless. Unless you get lucky to find a light vehicle, it will be difficult to penetrate other tanks. But if you switch to armor-piercing rounds, damage becomes complete disaster. It is a lose-lose situation. I am not even sure if the shell damages opponent's crew or just scares them a little, forcing them to pee all over themselves. While heavy tanks usually become more comfortable in arcade, thanks to engine boost and faster turret traverse, Churchill Mark I still doesn't feel right, because its limited offensive capabilities feel even worse in a game mode where heavier vehicles are most popular. Getting closer to opponents somewhat helps with penetration, but that also increases the risk that you will be swarmed with opponents, so when pushing forward, try to have some allies nearby. They will cover your back and grab your kills to themselves. Usually I avoid playing slow tanks, but Churchill Mark I has good enough armor to compensate for possible mobility inconveniences. Who cares about positioning when opponents can't penetrate you anyway? The most frustrating was penetration and damage. The most damaging APHE round doesn't really do much damage, and the most penetrating APBC doesn't have a lot of penetration. So deciding which shell type to use felt like choosing lesser of two evils rather than the best round for the situation. I would rate this vehicle 6 non-penetrations out of 10. Mobility, somewhat acceptable, armor, fantastic, but shooting is questionable. With light enemy tanks it's easy, you shoot and do at least some damage. But when facing heavier opponents, it just doesn't feel right to have twice more cannons and still struggle with damage. Since I'm not looking for a challenge, I prefer to play this tank in realistic purely because there are more light tanks.